We're gonna get started. Welcome everyone. Hello. Welcome to the RPO Leadership Forum, a free monthly webinar series hosted by the Recruitment Process Outsourcing Association and presented by RPOA members. This is Abourahma, Executive Director of the RPOA, and it is my pleasure to welcome a fun and dynamic panel of all-star recruiting masters from Advanced RPO, a gold member of the RPOA and a leading recruitment process outsourcing provider. The panel will be moderated by Advanced Director of Business Development, Anne-Marie Penny. We encourage your active participation. Feel free to chime in the chat and share your thoughts and your questions. To answer the first question, yes, you will be able to access the webinar recording through the RPOA website by tomorrow. With that, I want to welcome a first-time guest on the RPO Leadership Forum, Anne-Marie, who will be moderating the panel. Welcome, Anne-Marie. Tell us about yourself and your team.
Hello, everybody. I'm Anne-Marie Penny. I am Director of Business Development for the Western region of Advanced RPO, and very happy to be here. So if any of y'all are interested in exploring an RPO solution or just want to pick my brain for hiring, I'm a past founder of an executive search firm for technology companies and other rapid growth, as well as Fortune 500. So we've all been around the block for a minute or two. So I'm really honored to introduce our speaker panel. We have Mike Foster of the beautiful radio voice as our global talent acquisition leader. Sarah Buck is an account manager and just a superhero among superheroes. And then finally, Kevin Armstrong as our program director. Kevin is actually going to lead off with our first topic today, and it is about ghosting. So keep the chat interactive. If you have been ghosted as a hiring manager or just a person in general, type a 1 in the chat. And Kevin, we're going to hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Anne-Marie. Appreciate it. Ghosting has been a very hot topic over the last couple of years, and it really wasn't something that we paid much attention to in the talent acquisition world prior to about 5 years ago. We saw it explode under the pandemic. It has certainly gotten better since our last update on the RPOA webinar about a year ago. We are definitely seeing these rates improve, but they're certainly not back to where they once were. And I do believe it is here to stay. There's a lot of factors that we look at when we look at why people are ghosting, why candidates are ghosting. The top 3 reasons that we've seen are listed here. But I think they're really all interlinked to all of the topics we're about to talk about today. There's the job market, wage growth, really inefficient recruiting processes tend to be the one that we focus in on significantly to show, where we can really improve quite quickly. And at the end of the day, all of those things together really provide this environment where candidates don't feel a lot of pain if they just ghost you, right? There's a lot of opportunities out there. There's a lot of different places these candidates can go in this market. And sometimes it's just easier for these candidates to not respond than to do the hard thing and write an email withdrawing or showing their lack of interest. One of the things I also, we really focus on with our client base is ghosting's not just at one interview stage, right? Candidates are ghosting you at the application stage, right? They don't finish the application because they didn't like what they read or they didn't like the question the way it was asked. They're ghosting you when they're not scheduling an interview. They're ghosting you when they don't show up to an interview. Obviously, not showing up to the interview is the one where we feel the most pain because we're sitting there on the other end waiting for them. But we really need to look at each of those stages all the way through, right? We have people ghost offers now, right? You have an offer out, you never hear back. Those things are, every piece of this process is what we would analyze to improve that. We do not have any sense that it's all going to go away, right? There will still be ghosting, but we can optimize and clients and all hiring agencies and corporations should be optimizing every stage of that process to move quickly, be concise, set the proper expectations with the candidates, and move forward. I generally work at the non-exempt level type jobs where we have large sums of data. But I know Mike works with, mostly the corporate level. And you see a lot of the same things, right, Mike?
Yeah, no, and it's interesting because a lot of times when we talk ghosting, it goes into the non-exempt skilled labor type area. But my focus, which is predominantly the exempt level corporate roles, we certainly see it. I would say where the trend over the last I'd say year, even a few months, the way that the talent market changes, it seems like on the drop of a dime nowadays. But the trend in ghosting that we see isn't as much of competing offers, competing clients, and they're just, going with another offer. The transparency of the process is where we're seeing that the companies that are being as transparent, especially around things from pay transparency, or the big one now is the transparency of the location, tend to have a lot less problems with ghosting than folks that aren't as transparent all the way back to the job description. So as Kevin mentioned, from the second that person views that job and truly understanding what they're getting themselves into, we see ghosting start to get a little higher with clients that just aren't as transparent that this is a hybrid position, that they want 3 days on site. People are willing to do that, but there's remote folks that aren't willing to do it. So when you bring somebody in who's thinking it's a remote job, then they find out through the first round of interviews that it's a hybrid position, you tend to start to see the ghosting start to increase. And as Kevin mentioned, unfortunate that sometimes they don't just write a letter and pull out of the process and things like that, all the way up to executive levels. We've seen where it's just to disappear. And honestly, that type of approach is something that I would call on if you're in talent acquisition on this call. Us as talent acquisition folks, let's make sure we're not ghosting candidates on our end. Right. I think that behavior started way back in 2007, 2008, where candidates were applying to jobs or talking to recruiters and then never heard back. And I think it built a little bit of a culture that that's okay during a recruitment process. So I'd say as leaders in talent acquisition, let's also make sure we're not ghosting candidates and things as well, and really pushing the behavior that we would want to see out of candidates when they're interviewing for us, and starting to build back that loyalty between the employers and the candidates. But I would absolutely say, as transparent as you can be in your job descriptions, when your recruiters are talking to candidates, making sure that it all aligns and is transparent with your hiring managers, with everybody who's touching that process. Because the second a candidate starts to feel that something's off, or it's not what I thought it was, the tendency of ghosting starts to increase.
The two things I'll leave, kind of the way I frame it for our clients is, at the non-exempt level, we think of it as a bit of a race, right? Your process needs to move quickly because time kills all deals in those. And so really you have to look at, assuming that your candidate applied to 50 jobs on the same day, how are you standing out in that bunch, right? And at the more exempt level or corporate level roles, I really think of it more as this candidate's interviewing you as much as you're interviewing them, right? And if you're misleading them on the job description, on the pay, on the travel requirements, on any of that, even just by being vague, candidates will take that as being misled, and sometimes will reciprocate by not necessarily responding when you come back to them. So I think we can move on. Obviously, all these topics, as we said, are linked, but I do think we've seen an improvement in ghosting, but I would definitely say it's here to stay, way more than it was before.
Yeah, and Kev, I would just kind of reiterate too, as you mentioned, candidates interviewing you as much as you're interviewing them. I've seen that so significantly increase. So I think it's incredibly important. It's been a bit of change management, right, from a lot of companies where they think they're the one interviewing that candidate, but it's twofold. And they have to be willing to understand that these candidates are talking to other organizations as well. And they want to know what makes you stand out. So being able to address those things during the interview process and be upfront about them is going to decrease the ghosting.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Sarah, and I think that moves right into kind of where we're headed, in my discussion topic here on the wage growth portion, because where I see the trend a little bit changing here is we're seeing less of especially in my world and what Sarah's world, I think, focuses in on. I'll let her kind of chime in on this as well. Less of you're getting to the offer process and there's 5 or 6 other offers with other employers. We're actually seeing you're competing with their current job.
Right.
And what we're tending to see now is candidates are very interested in having conversations, going through an interview process, learning about the business, and hearing your sales pitch. When they get to the end of the process, they're starting to weigh their options versus their current job, which most of the time they're not in a situation where they're desperately looking to leave. They were hoping for some of the big pay increases that I think you were getting a year ago and different things, and starting to evaluate with the way they're seeing things on the news around the economy. Is this the right time for me to make this move? I'm okay at my employer now. I feel stable. I feel like it's a decent position. Is it really worth me making a move? And we're seeing candidates start to have that decision making and that thought process towards the end of the process, which has started to increase offer declines and things like that. And we've seen where people are just deciding to stay at their current employer instead of actually making a move. Sarah, I mean, are you seeing that similar kind of trend?
Absolutely. It's almost like a cold feet, right? They test the waters. They want to have conversations. They want to explore what's out there. They want to understand what other organizations are offering, what the compensation looks like, and really investing quite a bit of time with hiring managers and going through that process and then getting to that offer and then deciding, you know what, I think I'm going to stay put. Things are okay where I'm at. And then having kind of that cold feet and not really ready to make that change.
Are you guys seeing any trends in either direction related to counter offers? Because that always factors in with wage growth.
I've seen a little bit, but nothing real significant, I would say. I mean, it's typically the candidate withdrawing.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say that's slowed down over the last year. If you asked me that question 12 months ago, companies were counter offering people left and right. Mm-hmm. I think some of this decision is actually happening now before they put their notice in because they're a little bit more cautious. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like when you think of the housing market, for the longest time, you didn't buy your next home until you sold your current one. Housing market got so crazy that people were putting offers in homes and then putting their house up for sale. Right. And you're starting to see that swap again in the housing market. And you're starting to see that happen here in the employment market as well, where people, I think, are a little slower on making that decision of, do I put notice in and try and get and negotiate with my current employer, or do I just sit tight?
I would say on the non-exempt level of this, we saw the greatest wage growth we've probably seen ever in the last 2 years. Maybe not ever, but certainly in my career, we've certainly saw a lot of these companies going from entry level wages of $12 and $13 to $16, $17, $20, $22, right? And so that caused a huge amount of turnover in the market, right? People were jumping for those jobs. Seems to have settled out, right? So we're not seeing the volume of people move from one job to another, which creates backfill, opportunities where more people move in to fill those jobs. The whole thing is really slowed down, probably to a much healthier pace, if we're being honest, for the economy and for all these clients and companies out there. But yeah, we've really seen that the numbers have really settled in that, if you're paying $18 to $22 as an entry level role, depending on your geography and your industry, you're retaining your talent now, and you're not seeing huge people just walk out the back door that you need to backfill on a daily basis. So certainly is moderated in this area.
Yeah, I would say that's similar on the exempt corporate side as well. I think the days of the $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 pay raise every 6 months when you wanted to move to jobs is over. I don't think there's going to be a pullback where wages are going to be drastically reduced. I think you're going to get back to what it was in 2018, 19, as far as wage growth, and things are just kind of leveling off of pre-COVID times. And what you're also saying, to Kevin's point, is that I think people got to wages where they're feeling a little bit more comfortable with their wage, and they're not necessarily looking to make a move. So from a retention standpoint, I think most of our clients that I have seen, retention issues have slowed down, and they're retaining people. And I think it's because they caught up to where deservingly some people should be getting paid and things like that. And then when you look at how the economy is sitting today, that reluctancy is played into it. So good thing is I think turnover is decreasing. From a candidate perspective, I don't necessarily think that there's a lot of companies out there willing to give, massive pay increases for people who may only have 6 out of 10 qualifications moving forward. But I don't see a pullback or any kind of decrease when it comes to wages.
Well, that certainly supports some of the topics that Sarah's going to talk about in relation to competition for talent. Because if wages isn't the only tool, then, let's talk about how that impacts the competition and what else we got.
All right. Thanks, Anne Marie. I do think it's important. Obviously, the job market is incredibly alive, right? So despite what you hear on the media, despite what we hear, the jobs report every year, month over month since January has exceeded the expectations. I think May was the biggest jump that we've had all year. So obviously, more positions are becoming available. Layoffs are, while we hear about them, they're really minimal. I think less than 1% of the workforce is laid off every month. And while we've seen a lot of those in the tech space, we've seen a lot of growth in a lot of the other areas. So I think it's important to note that, we need to continue to be really thoughtful around, organizations need to be continually thoughtful around their hiring practices, looking at their headcount. We haven't seen layoffs with any of our clients that we support or we work with. And I think it's important to just kind of, like Mike alluded to, I think companies are really trying to get back to where things were pre-pandemic, right? Right-sizing their organization and making sure that they're not just hiring to hire. Mike said, retention is better. People are leaving, not leaving like they used to be, like we talked about before. They're getting to that, having conversations with other organizations, getting to that end, but then they decide to stay with their current company. So from the exempt level side, I think that, you're still seeing a lot of livelihood within the market with the number of positions opened every month. So I think it's just really about paying close attention and seeing where this goes. I mean, obviously we don't know what the coming months will be, but I think it's been a nice surprise for a lot of the people who expected it to be much different.
I'd say at the end of the day, it's never a bad time to have a great recruiting process, right?
Right.
It's even though you hear about these things, our clients are still being successful in recruiting. We're still filling hundreds and hundreds of jobs a month for our clients. It's not the doom and gloom that you think that you would gather if you just watch the news. It's certainly not December of 2021 when it was every client we had 10 times their average openings. It was just insanity. It feels a lot more normal, which is good, right? That's not a bad thing. But it's also feels pretty similar to where we were in 2019, right? I would say, clients are opening jobs and we're filling jobs. It certainly hasn't fallen off a cliff. At the same time, I would say it's probably harder to find the right person today than it was in 2018, 2019, because it is tight. I mean, it's 3% unemployment. Right. Just leads to there's just not enough people to go around, right? And at some point, having the best practice, the best process available to you can only help you in that environment, right? We can, we work with our clients to move faster, to be better, to be more transparent, as Michael was saying. It's really, it's competitive out there, and you can still be adding value to your organizations by doing talent acquisition the right way.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Kevin. And the job market is still alive. Headline there, I think, is really important and true. And what people have to really think about is the talent shortage and the demographics of the United States has been a problem long before COVID hit. This has kind of been brewing since 2014 and 15, that eventually we were going to have these shortages in a lot of different industries. When you just look at pure demographics of the United States, more people retiring, not enough coming in, eventually that's going to be a recipe for a disaster. COVID just accelerated that much faster than where we thought that was going to really be. So the talent shortage, when you go back into 2017, 18, and 19, it was there. Unemployment was, in the 3 to 4%, sitting through there. Market was very healthy. I do think we're getting back into that type of market, but that type of market was still an extremely challenging market for people to face, and having a strong recruitment process, a strong, employee value proposition on why someone wants to work with you, an employer, is just as important as today as it was 24 months ago, as it was 10 years ago. So always things that you want to make sure that you're keeping on the forefront and keeping updated as much as possible.
We had a question from one of our audience members, Mark, and it could be for any of you, related to the transparency with salary and benefits, which is something different than pre-COVID era. So we're curious, how is that relating to competition for talent? And are you seeing any differences in terms of dropout rates if that kind of disclosure is much more upfront now?
I definitely think you're seeing people drop out less frequently. Well, I think it's having a positive impact on the process. I think what the challenge is with some of those aspects, right, everything's a two-edged sword. You don't have the opportunity to talk to the candidates about some of the other benefits that may come into this, some of the flex work schedules. And so, as recruiters, we've all been in situations where you've got that person who says they want, X number more dollars than we're offering. But you can fill in that gap, right, with benefits, with, this is, you get every other Friday off, whatever it is, right, whatever the client is talking about. So those people who are not applying because they see like this range that they don't like, I find some frustration in that, because you're not able to actually kind of talk to that person and sell them on it at all. But probably more times than not, that person wasn't going to be interested anyway. So you probably are saving some time from the candidate and the client perspective by just not having that person apply in the first place. If that's really what they were very worried about. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I would agree. I think companies are all still trying to learn what pay transparency really means.
Right.
It sounds easy to implement, and even when we talk about it, if you're an employer, there's challenges that come along with it. Internal equity, making sure everything is organized within your organization. And again, to Kevin's point, how do you advertise it? How do you also get out there all the intangibles on top of it? Because it's not just salary, it's not just what commission is or different things like that. So there certainly are challenges. Some transparency is better than no transparency is how I look at it, but you still want to have to make sure your recruiters are out there pushing and driving and having those conversations with candidates around the total packages, as opposed to just relying that somebody's going to apply to your job because they think the salary range that you put out there looks good.
Well, great. All very good points. And let's move over to the last topic of the day, which is around scalability. Specifically, how companies can build out a recruitment program to reduce fixed cost and still be agile. In fact, Michael from our audience put up a question related to that, because, the tech industry out of all of the sectors has been getting hit really hard, relatively speaking. So they're not using outside recruiters, and curious, do you shift to other sectors? Do you wait it out? All of this relates to scalability. So, Mike, I'm excited to see what you and the rest of the team can share.
Sorry, there was a fly going across my screen. If you saw me,
very big.
I apologize.
Very big
So to that question, it's a tough question. Now, I'm a firm believer of diversification and diversifying across as many different industries as you can. And my approach to recruiting is really strong, good recruiters tend to be able to work in a lot of different areas, and as more you can diversify across, really kind of help you from a scalability perspective. If you're an RPO, in the space and how we typically look at it. So when you're diversified across multiple industries, it allows you to be okay with if one industry starts to go a little bit slower, your hope is you have some others. And there's certainly, a lot of industries out there that are going very, very strong right now. You can still drive around, any city or area in the United States, and you'll see, warehouses and different things like that with, help now signs pretty much everywhere. You haven't seen anybody taking them down by any means. So tech space, I think from what I've seen in there is kind of right sizing. Their layoffs, I don't think are necessarily going to be, that they're reducing, massive amounts of folks and never going to hire again. I think they're trying to figure out what's the real market look like and where does our headcount have to be. And as that picks up, I don't think it's going to take long till you're going to see tech, kind of rebound from that perspective as well. In a scalability sense, I think it's extremely important to anyone on this call, whether you're an employer, you're an RPO, that you're building some type of talent acquisition solution that is scalable. And when I say scalable, it means anywhere in the process, you're able to increase bandwidth and lower bandwidth, as quickly as possible. To be able to service your clients and not to toot our own horn, I think it's something that we do very well here. Where we have, different support mechanisms and things like that to support our recruitment teams that are able to make those agile movements up and down. One of the first things you started to see, and it's unfortunate because it is our industry, especially in the tech space, was, talent acquisition was kind of the first to take the brunt of a lot of the layoffs and things like that. And, unfortunately, when times were good, a lot of companies went out and built a massive talent acquisition function. Well, when times slow down a little bit, what do you do with that talent acquisition function? And that becomes extremely difficult for companies to handle and be able to do it quickly. It's still very difficult to go out and hire really strong, good recruiters, quickly. So if you're an employer and the business all of a sudden says, we need to fill 100 positions and your way of scaling is I'm going to have to go out and hire 15, 20 recruiters, it's going to take you a long time to do that. And building a solution to be able to support that, in particular, what a lot of RPOs, including ourselves, tend to really specialize in is being able to make those nimble, scalable processes throughout. And, we can build those, for each individual client on how that typically works, but we've gotten very good at scaling across multiple different industries to support business needs.
Yeah, it's kind of the secret sauce of RPO, right, Mike? Is everyone is always eager to lay off their recruiters first. When you're not hiring, that just looks like a big cost to a CFO out there looking to cut some heads, and that makes sense, right? We've lucked out over the years through that. We've been able to attract a ton of really, really wonderful recruiters who stopped playing that game and were able to join our team to get some more job security, honestly. And we, that's the type of people that we build our teams around. So, obviously, the ability for us to flex up, flex down, you give us one rec 1 month and 100 the next, no big deal, is a real sweet spot for us. And our teams are really helpful, thankful about that because they get a lot more job security by working in this function than working directly for a lot of major corporations. So
the ability to pivot, and like Mike said, a good recruiter can recruit in almost any industry, truly, and be successful.
Absolutely.
100%. Well, great job, you guys. This has been very informative, and, statistics are one thing and stories from the front lines are a whole other thing. So hopefully everybody in our audience has been able to learn something, and would love to hear any thoughts. If you agree, disagree, see something different, have other questions, this is your time to shine. We're at the half an hour mark, but we do have more time, and we'll take as much time for any additional questions. And if I missed anything in the chat, please ask your question again, because we want to make sure that you have the energy. And you're welcome, Michael. That was a great question, and I'm glad you liked the answer too.
Thank you so much, Anne-Marie. And just as she said, we are going to stick around for questions from the audience. Feel free to drop them in the chat or the Q&A. And as we allow time for questions, I do want to take screen sharing back from Kevin, if you don't mind, and share a few announcements from the RPOA. Thank you. Right. So welcome again, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this great webinar and discussion from the Advanced team as much as I did. For those of you who are new to the RPOA, I want to quickly introduce the Recruitment Process Outsourcing Association. We are a member-driven and mission-driven organization serving the global RPO ecosystem and striving to be the place to go for RPO. The RPO ecosystem consists of anyone in talent acquisition with interest in RPO. This includes RPO providers, buyers, recruiting technology providers, HR consultants, and analysts. And we have mixed audience on today's call as well. Our mission is to nurture a collaborative community where thought leadership can be created and curated to educate the marketplace about RPO. And our corporate members and technology sponsors provide the primary funding of the association. Community membership is free and open to anyone. We currently have over 340 community members. And we also have some strategic partners that add value to our members, including Everest Group and IDC. The RPOA produces educational content in collaboration with corporate members and sponsors. Our content is focused on talent acquisition trends and best practices for the talent acquisition community. We host 2 active blogs, produce a monthly newsletter, and 2 webinar programs. The first is the RPO Leadership Forum. It is a monthly webinar series scheduled for the 3rd Tuesday of each month. These are 30-minute webinar presentations by RPOA members. Today's webinar is part of the series. And coming up in July, we are excited to welcome Orion Talent and Catherine Feely, who will be speaking about the importance of upskilling and reskilling. You can find upcoming events on the RPOA website under the Events tab. The second webinar program is the RPOA Expert Panel. We typically produce 3 to 4 expert panels each year. On July 18th, we are excited to host the 2023 State of Global RPO Panel in collaboration with our partners at Everest Group. You'll learn about new dynamics in the RPO market, industry challenges, technology and innovation, and market outlook. Registration is currently open. You can access webinar recordings and other content through the RPO Academy on rpoassociation.org. And coming up in July, we are launching a new podcast based on the content from our webinar programs, meaning you'll have the option to watch webinars live like you are doing today or on demand if you're watching the recording. In addition, you will be able to listen to the webinars on the go via Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and other podcast platforms. Stay tuned for Time to Hire, a new podcast from the RPOA. Lastly, I want to invite you to our premium event of the year and the only place you'll meet the largest community of people passionate about RPO, the RPOA Annual Conference, which will take place this year in Chicago on September 24th through the 26th. And you are all invited. Registration is open and early bird registration ends this July 1st. We hope to see you then. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and see if we have any outstanding questions. Anne-Marie, from the audience, you want to wrap up the meeting with?
Looks like we've got the questions answered, and I guess the question is, so what are we going to do with the rest of our day? Let's be cheerful, be productive, and it's Taco Tuesday, so my feed is full of tacos. If you're
Sounds
vegetarian,
like
have a monk fruit taco. They're very good. Any other final thoughts from our team? And by the way, find us on LinkedIn. That's where this webinar was. So if you're not connected to us already, we're very much about relationships and support beyond just having a client relationship, but pick our brain on anything and engage in our feed. So send us all a LinkedIn connection and we'll make sure that we stay in touch.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Thanks, Anne-Marie.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining, everybody.
Yes.
Thank you so much to our all speakers, Kevin, Sarah, Anne-Marie, and Mike. It's always a pleasure. And for our audience on today's webinar, please stay connected to stay engaged and stay informed of what's happening in the talent and RPO world by tuning into the RPOA, the place to go for RPO. Thank you again and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yep. Have a good one, everybody.
Bye-bye.